I am California of the past.
I am California of the past.
I am California of the past.
I joined Alamedans with Hope, Housing Opportunities Provided Equally, in 1966. The pastor of my church, the First Baptist Church, was involved with Hope, and he announced a meeting of people interested in fair housing in Alameda, and I attended. I wasn't even aware that there were people in Alameda who couldn't rent or buy a house because of the color of their skin. This was really eye-opening to me. Estuary Housing was a World War II housing project just east of Main Street in Alameda's West End. Over 500 units had been torn down already, and the city was threatening to demolish the remaining 112. The families were all low income, otherwise they wouldn't qualify to live there, and they were black and people wouldn't rent to them. The Alameda Housing Authority refused to resettle them in other housing authority units. So the Low-Cost Housing Committee of Estuary Housing organized the camp-in with the help of Hope and others in Alameda. They pitched tents in Franklin Park in the middle of the Gold Coast, and Hope members helped by bringing food for the campers. The city tried to drown them out by sending fire engines to hose down the park, but the estuary people stayed all weekend. We had a march through the Gold Coast in support of the camp-in, which was scary as the police stood at a corner on Grand Street and took pictures of each of us as we marched by. Hope members joined estuary tenants at the city council meeting that week, demanding that the city help the residents find replacement housing and postpone the demolition. Demolition was postponed, but the city did nothing to rehouse the estuary tenants until 1968, when a new housing authority was sworn in. Within 2 weeks, they took steps to resettle the 78 families still at Estuary. The same year as the camp-in, Hope members picketed the Atlantic Apartments on Poudre Street, which had a policy of not renting to minority people. We picketed every Sunday afternoon for 9 weeks, and some people even picketed the owner's home. Hope provided documentation of the discrimination, and Hope members testified at the hearing in San Francisco, which resulted in a decision against the owner. One family who had tried to rent an apartment there was the Stargell family. A teacher who had taught Willie Stargell at Encinal High School made points with the judge when he testified that the Stargell family had been refused an apartment. Willie Stargell was already well known by that time as a player with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The gradual demolition of the old substandard wartime projects forced people, many of them African American, out of Alameda. Hope soon realized that the discrimination was economic as well as racial, and to encourage our black neighbors to stay in Alameda, we needed to preserve the affordable housing that we had. Most of the housing authority units were demolished, were family housing, but many of the replacement units were senior housing, which was more acceptable politically. People were afraid of having them move over from Oakland. I remember hearing about the time that Clarence Gilmore came to a party at the Challops home on South Shore and was stopped by a policeman as he walked back to his car because there were no black people living in that neighborhood. After Proposition 14, a measure that blocked the 1963 Rumford Fair Housing Act, was overthrown in 1967, landlords still refused to rent to minorities. If a person suspected discrimination, Hope's volunteer checkers would test the unit by sending a white person and a black person with matching stories, for instance, the same age, same occupation, same family situation, to apply for the house or apartment, the unit. Often the minority person would be turned down for some reason other than race, and then the white person would apply, and the apartment would be available with no problem. If a clear-cut case of discrimination was found, Hope would try conciliation, and if that failed, the case would be referred to an attorney. For a number of years, Hope's work was done entirely by volunteers who educated themselves about housing law. Dorothy Allen was the main one, and Jeanette David also did a lot of counseling, joined by volunteers who did testing, fundraising, letter writing, speaking to groups, and many other things. In 1979, Hope received a grant to hire and train 2 housing counselors. Later, county funds provided staffing, and in 1982, the council gave Hope a community block grant contract for a housing counselor and office space. Hope activities from the beginning were divided between the business of fair housing services and social activities to encourage interracial friendships. We had an active social committee that planned picnics, theater parties, wine tastings, and New Year calling, an idea that Ann Taylor had introduced from Berkeley. Each year, on whatever Sunday in January didn't have an important ball game, we would have 3 homes open for the whole afternoon. We'd have a white home, a black home, and an Asian home, which would be either Filipino, Chinese, or Japanese. We always had a good turnout. Sometimes city officials came. We even had our Congressman Pete Stark and our Assemblyman several times. We were a strong group in Alameda for 23 years. Our board included Al DeWitt, who later served on the city council, and Clarence Gilmore, whose brother became an Oakland city councilman. We also elected 2 of our members, Lloyd Hurwitz and George Beckham, to the city council in 1973. We closed the office in 1988 because the funds available from the city of Alameda were not enough to pay for the operation. During the crisis times of Hope's early days and the continuing struggles through the years, Hope members and friends developed something that goes far deeper than mere friendship, a spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood that continues to this day.